Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. I am Mark Corbett. I'm with Mr. Matt Germain, as always. And today we have a very special guest, a journalist who has just been working tirelessly with a couple other folks, trying to see what's going to happen with that Tampa Bay Rays stadium. So welcome, Miss Colleen Wright. How are you today?
I'm good. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
You know, Matt and I had you here a while back, like you said, and it was interesting because we knew we were almost halfway to something happening or not happening. And Matt and I were talking just before you came on. It was like that whole 5-3 thing, it stayed pretty much the same as far as who was going to be on board and who wasn't.
Yes, I would say everything that happened yesterday was expected. Everything went as expected. There was a change that was made on the dais, and it was to strengthen some of the language when it came to some of the environmental and resilience and sustainability standards. Not just market to those standards, but to implement. They added the words to implement to the contract, which gives it a little more teeth that some of these things will actually happen versus just be aspirational. But other than that, I think everything happened yesterday how everyone kind of imagined it. Everyone, I think, knew how the votes were. Even critics who weren't happy and didn't want the deal to happen, there was a sense of like this is going to happen, and everyone, I think, if you wanted it to happen, you were very, very happy and thrilled. Can kind of maybe have a little bit of a sigh of relief. Of course, it's not totally done yet. We still need one more vote from the county, but they have a much simpler decision, and no one's really that unhappy on that board. But if you were a critic, I think you were just more kind of resigned and hoping that it will work out for the best.
What do you think, Matt? Were you surprised at any of this?
I watched the actual council meeting in its entirety, and I was, I think I told Mark and I put it on X that some of the people speaking really had a strong case made and a valid one with the worries that they had and some of the issues that they were bringing up that hadn't been addressed. And I think, Colleen, you had raised some of those in the last time we talked to you. So are you surprised that there weren't more stringent things put in place, especially when it comes to the sale and the commitment length that the team has in the area?
I think, I think by the last time we talked, we knew that some things were going to be tweaked and some things were strengthened. I guess at least to the comfortability of 5 council members. But those three were the 3 who are against were never going to be swayed. I mean, their concerns have stayed consistent from the jump. I mean, since the Rays announced with the city of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County last September, the Here to Stay conference, when they said we have a tentative deal, they were concerned then about the broad outlines of the deal, and those did not change. Some of the contract language and loopholes, some of that got a little bit cleaned up and a little more tightened. But it was to the comfortability of 5 people. But those 3 were not going to be swayed. There was one council member who had previously kind of positioned herself as a swing vote, but in the last few months has been very positive and optimistic, and she was in. There really were no surprises. Would I think it would be any stronger? I knew that the contours of the deal would not really change that much.
Right.
And everybody acknowledged, yeah, I don't know about everybody, but most people, including council members, acknowledged yesterday that it was not perfect. And that not everyone was going to be on board, and it's still not perfect, but it was kind of good enough, and they needed a vision. And I think there was also a risk that the Rays would walk away. Now, whether you care or not, that's a separate thing. But I think a lot of people looked at this and was like, it's not perfect, but it's what we can do. And that was the decision yesterday.
Do you think that the need for St. Petersburg to actually develop that area, in a timely basis, so that it doesn't keep dragging on and on and on, and they don't lose the Rays as a potential piece of the puzzle? Do you think how much of that do you think goes into those 5 positive votes?
Yeah. I think even people like, for example, I'm going to name the Suncoast Sierra Club, right? They were pushing for stronger environmental standards. Just them, but I mean, even beyond Sierra Club, a lot of people I think wanted the Rays to stay. They're not now. Are there people who are anti-baseball, don't care if baseball stays or go, if the Rays stay or go, or if St. Petersburg remains a Major League Baseball team. Are there people who don't care about that? Yes. But a lot of people who were involved, like the Rays, are fans of the Rays, but just did not think that this deal was fair. They thought the deal was very lopsided towards the Rays. And they just wanted to fix the deal. A lot of folks yesterday were wearing stickers that said "fix the deal," because they want the Rays to stay. They just wanted, what in their minds, what they thought was more equitable, maybe in terms of what the Rays were putting up or what the city is putting up, and then in the language itself, because there are still a lot of backdoors for affordable housing, for environmental standards, for things not getting built on time. There's ways to get around these things, and that just didn't sit right with people. But yeah, the threat of the Rays leaving, I think a lot of people do want the Rays to stay. They just, I think, look at it as this is going to impact our community for 30 years. And even though some people might have the best of intentions now, those same people are not going to be around 10, 20, 30 years from now. And we all know if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable. You got to go by a contract. And I think that was the big focus. And a lot of people, while there was celebration, a lot of people were silent yesterday. It was a heavy decision yesterday.
It was.
Looking at that and the group of folks who voted no, there were some consistencies. As you said, one of them, I think it may have been Mr. Floyd, was saying, I think that he said this is a way of just giving welfare to billionaires, something to that effect.
Yes, yeah, he did not attend that September press conference I was referring to on that principle of he doesn't believe in corporate welfare. He doesn't believe in the public subsidizing private corporations. He's just very much against that. He points to a lot of academic research that shows that public investment into private stadiums just doesn't net good returns. And he's been consistent from that. Actually, pretty much all three of them, really have been consistent in their reasoning. You've got Lisette Hanowitz, Councilmember Lisette Hanowitz, that she's a former federal prosecutor. And I mean, she litigated the heck out of this thing. She went line by line, chapter and verse, and pointed out all the flaws in the agreement. And she still had those same concerns, and some of those flaws still remained in this contract. So the lines were drawn. I really don't think there were any surprises yesterday.
I was going to say, do you think any of Hanowitz's, you said some of Hanowitz's concerns were addressed, though?
Some of them were. I don't think they were entirely cleaned up. I think they were tightened, for sure. They definitely tightened a few things. I'll give you an example. I believe last time I was on the show, we might have talked about how some of these 65 acres of publicly owned land could be resold by the Rays and Hines, right? City is selling them for under appraised value. The Rays and Hines can turn around and resell them to other developers. And that language was tightened to be that they can't transfer that property unless the companies who are on the receiving end of that deal, Rays affiliates or Hines affiliates. But what Lisette Hanowitz was pushing for on Tuesday when there was a workshop before the vote, she was saying, well, what does that mean? Rays or Hines affiliates? Like, what does that mean? Can we look at the contract that is the Hines, it's like Hines Historic Gas Plant Partnership, which is the Rays and Hines, and they don't want to show that agreement. It's not a public record. They won't share it with City Council. The City Council really has no way to vet who would be on the receiving end of those transactions. So, they'll have to be affiliated with the Rays or Hines, but still, that's an unknown. So I think she was just looking out for worst case scenario. And again, you talk about intentions. The intentions of the people who put this deal together might be good, but these aren't going to be the same people carrying out this deal 10, 20, 30 years from now. And that's why it's so important.
I always like to look at things from a conceptual view, like take a back seat and look at the entire scope of it. Because I lived through the Jeffrey Loria events through Montreal, and then saw what happened to Miami once he left over there. And he basically threw both of those cities under the bus. So when I look at the Rays situation, I look at Stu. I say, okay, first of all, he kept the team in the Tampa region, which is great. That's awesome. He paid $65 million for a 48% stake in 2004. Eventually, he grew that to 85%. We don't know the exact numbers of what that cost him, but let's just say, for argument's sake, it's under $200 million total. And now he's got a team that's valued at $1.3 billion. He's made money every year because they've kept the budget below what income they needed to operate the team. So every year he's making millions for 20 years. And then he gets a deal where 4 years from now, it'll increase the value of the team. If we look at the Braves as an example, when they built their new stadium and they got the property for it, they essentially got a valuation increase about the same as the stadium value minus $100,000, $100 million. So if we do that with the Rays, we say, okay, the stadium ends up costing 1.3 billion, which is, it could end up being 1.5, could end up being whatever, but let's just say 1.3. You take off 100 million, that's 1.2 billion. It basically doubles the value of the Rays because previously they didn't own their stadium. They were just leasing. So he's doubling the value of the Rays. And the year after it's built, he can walk away and sell it for 2.5 billion after investing 200 million in it.
I just want to be clear though that the stadium will remain county owned.
Okay.
The stadium remains county owned, but the Rays do get to play there and have full control over it. All broadcasting rights, naming rights. The Rays concessions, tickets, they keep all that revenue. But the facility itself will remain publicly owned, county owned.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So that does change things slightly.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're not going to be, a private company. Yeah, the stadium's going to remain public under this deal.
Okay. Good clarity. I like it.
Yeah, I tell you, man, that would be that would be very advantageous to an owner.
No, if the whole stadium was privately owned, that would have been an entirely different conversation, and I'm not sure that would fly because it's taxable to the county. That's the issue.
Well, and there's components of this I was curious about, came in late, I guess, trying to assuage somebody. And that was like an open fruit and vegetable market?
They wanted plans because if you think about it, they're going to build a minimum of it's like 4,400 or 5,000 minimum, not even target, minimum residences on the property.
Yeah.
You do the math, that's like maybe 1 to 2 to 3 people per unit. It's going to be like 10,000 people on, in this area of 86 acres. I mean, not counting the stadium, so 65. But the question came up of, well, we need like a grocery store. How are these people going to, there's a Publix down the street, but it's small. St. Pete is already like pretty dense in the core. So yes, there's going to be a fresh food retailer that's supposed to go in there. But even that grocery store I don't think it has to be built until like 2045.
That's
going to be a
number.
minute.
That's the number.
It's gonna be a minute until you see. It's gonna be 20 years until you see a grocery store there.
And there's
it could be sooner, but not legally enforceable. The clause doesn't kick in until 2045.
No, I was a little concerned because I know some cities have like a food desert. Certain end of town may not be very prosperous, and you see grocery stores close, et cetera. So if you are growing this, now I'm looking at this image. It looks, I guess you all put together, and it shows the 4,400 housing units, the number of parking spaces. By the way, it's a great graphic. Anybody want to see it? I guess you got that on TampaBayTimes.com.
Yes, it's on TampaBay.com, and it'll be in the Sunday paper.
There you go. But so that's all. I was just curious about the food in 2045.
Yes, grocery store.
Yeah, I may not be around there, so but I plan on enjoying the stadium nonetheless.
Stadium will be ready, God willing, 2028. 3 years, 4 years. Well, under 4 years now at this point. 3.5.
So they'll be getting out the shovel soon anyway.
2025. So right now what they're going to do is they got to go get a lot of permits. Actually, the city council still has to vote on some zoning changes. They were supposed to be approved. They're scheduled to be approved yesterday, but because of like notice requirements and state law, since they moved it, they got to give like 30 days notice. So those will be voted on in August. I'm sure it's going to be the same thing, a 5-3 vote. So then after that, they have to get a bunch of permits to start construction. They're going to keep on with the designs. A shovel is supposed to go in the ground next year, 2025.
Yeah, that's Brian. I think it's Brian Ald was saying in January is when they're hoping to get the shovels in the ground, and knowing with delays that they have a lot of times with construction, hopefully it's a smooth ride all the way through. It'll be interesting to see what they build first. Do you have any indications of which buildings will be going up first?
The stadium.
That's it.
That's actually from the beginning. That was one of the early critiques early on. One of the critiques early on was there's not a lot of like development timelines. The only development timeline was the stadium to be ready for opening day 2028. Because, and why do I keep saying 2028? The city's current agreement with the Rays like sunsets at the end of 2027.
Right.
That's why this whole thing of like, what are we going to do? Our contract's expiring. We got to have something ready by 2028. So really, that's the first thing. That's the only thing that's going to be open the soonest. And then by 2030, there's supposed to be 300, I believe, the first batch of affordable housing units, 300 units. I believe 100 of those are supposed to be for senior housing, like for seniors to move into. And they'll have like some conference space, like retail right around, but it's going to be like right around the stadium. And I think it's going to like fan out from the stadium. But the stadium is the priority. It is the crown jewel of this development. Even though a whole city is going to go in there, that's going to be built out over 30 years. Like the the new agreement with the Rays is for 30 years, and the build out is for 30 years. And the clause that they have lets the Rays start looking elsewhere or the city 5 years before the expiration. And while that's happening, they'll still be putting up residences. Like
Right.
it'll still be a construction site, even when the Rays term is over.
And that's what I was telling Mark, but in an earlier podcast we did where I can see Stu Sternberg keeping this team and his family for the foreseeable future, just because the length of the deal and the the kind of aura that he's brought to the team in terms of bringing his I think it's his son that has come in and started kind of operating certain things with the team, and I think there's a lot more value to add, sort of like how you look at the Yankees with Steinbrenner and his kids, where they're not going to be at the finish line of increasing the valuation of this team for quite a while. So and you look at the TV rights and how they're changing and how just broadcasting games in general is going to be revolutionized over the years, how much gambling is impacting the game. There's a lot more to add to this. But do you know in particular what's going to happen of the Trop? Because a lot of people have a lot of heartstrings about that stadium. The ones who love it a lot. The ones who hate it a lot. So what's going to take place with that building once they move in?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. So to answer this question, I think it's also important to know where the new stadium is going in.
Mhm.
And if you were looking, it's on the same site, but to be even more clear, the new stadium will be built just east of the current site on the other side of Booker Creek, which is going to be enhanced, I should say, to be more of a feature, because right now you would miss it. But it's
Yeah.
just going to be on that surface parking just east of the current Trop.
Right.
The city is fronting a lot of these costs, right? They're fronting $114 million for infrastructure. That includes the demolition of the Trop. So the Rays are going to stay in the Trop until the new stadium is ready. Then they'll all move into the new stadium. And then that is when they will demolish the Trop, and there will be different buildings, residences. I don't have the site map in front of me, or I could tell you, but it's going to be either like residences, office space, hotel. It'll just be part of the development.
Going to be interesting to see how that all looks and how what is actually added to the plans over time, because we know plans change, and as long as they agree to modifications, there's a lot more that can be altered over time. So do you have a favorite part of the development overall that you kind of point to as being something that you see as vital and integral other than the stadium?
So, I mean, I don't want to give my personal opinion of like what I'm looking forward to, but I think a big part of the deal that is pretty integral to the deal and kind of a big deal is that they're looking for a new home for the Woodson African Museum of Florida.
Right.
And there are plans for it to be kind of like at the entrance to the gas plant. It would be like the first build it kind of like, where Fergs is, like after, if you're aware, where Fergs is, it's going to be facing First Avenue South. So it'll be right at the entrance. And it would become the first purpose-built African-American history museum in the state of Florida. So instead of like just an African-American museum moving into an existing building, it'll be the first building built for that purpose. And part of the community benefits that the Rays have offered, they've offered a package of $50 million to go towards programs and, small and minority-owned businesses and fostering, kind of help building up those businesses and helping them thrive, and educational pipelines, things like that. They're also part of that package is giving $10 million to the Woodson African American Museum of Florida. That's not going to cover the entire cost. The Woodson has to actually come up with its own plan to get $30 to $40 million of that money to get that donation. So there are strings and technical things attached. But that was a part of it. Of course, critics say like, we could have just built a Woodson without the Rays. Like we didn't need that. If we wanted to prioritize an African American history museum, we could have just done that. But nevertheless, it is kind of a big part of the deal. And so that's pretty prominent. That would be something that would be unique to the city of St. Petersburg.
I would also point that, like you noted, there's a lot of traffic that's going to be going through there for concerts, for events at the new park, and for the area and the development in general. So sure, you could do it without the Rays, but there'll be a lot more traffic and a lot of more, traffic through the museum, the more you get people from outside of the region into that area for various, events. So I think that's a pretty cool piece. I also think, at a time in history when history is under attack in some cases, it's nice to have some places to kind of keep things in perspective, and that'll be that kind of place where people can kind of go to. And yeah, I agree. I think that's the one that catches my eye when I look at it. I don't know which hotel chain is going to be going in there for the hotel portion. I don't know who the concert promoters are going to be, what events they'll actually be able to draw, all that kind of stuff. But I think the more, that of the identity of the people and the things that are important to the people in that region you can include, then the better off it is.
Yeah. And to your point, a lot of people said that too, again, I'm trying to represent all kind of viewpoints here, but they like the Rays as an anchor, as kind of like a development anchor. And they were looking to the Battery in Atlanta. I mean, this is going to be 2 to 3 times the Battery size. And we have that comparison in our graphic and in that story that you referenced earlier. But I'm so sorry, I lost my train of thought. To your point, to being an anchor tenant, right? They see the Rays as being an anchor tenant, and that you wouldn't just come, right now you just kind of come to the game and you leave. There's nothing really, I mean, there's tons of things around there, but they're not immediately surrounding the ballpark like it would be in this. So they're trying to create like a 365-day venue with the stadium. I believe there's going to be like a brewery in there, and other attractions I can't remember off the top of my head, that you could go even when baseball's not going on and go inside and see the field and enjoy the facility. And maybe you go to see the museum and a game, or you just go for dinner. So the idea is kind of this idea of a mixed use attraction where people live, play, and work, that they think is kind of like the best investment, best public and private investment for this.
I think it's great because I can tell you firsthand, whenever I go visit a baseball stadium, I'm hanging around in the area beforehand, whether it's Camden or in the red, in Fenway. You go to the streets nearby or the bars nearby, and you go visit the area and you get to know it a little bit. You go see the Babe Ruth Museum in Baltimore, or you go and shoot pool and do a whole bunch of other things. So I think it is important to have things to do, because fans generally don't just go to the game and leave and then that's all they want. They want the whole package. And I think the Rays have been missing that. And it's something that goes missing when people argue against it. And I think the attendance is going to stay the same and low. And I do think and feel that the rhetoric that Stu brought in, whether or not it was to his doing, on purpose or not, I think he was trying to get the best deal, for the stadium build, however he could do it. But since 2015, when you look at the drop in attendance, I think it's clearly associated with the threats of leaving the area, and that it only got worse over time. And that now, what I'm intrigued to see is whether or not we see an uptick in the attendance because they know the Rays are going to stick around for the foreseeable future, assuming the
Mhm.
vote on July 30th.
Right. And I believe one of my colleagues reported that the Rays do have like projections of attendance figures. That, that's not subject to public record, so I haven't seen it. And there's this element of like the novelty effect, right? If you build it, they will come. I've also talked to economists that say, well, that drops off after 5-10 years. That remains to be seen. Obviously we don't know. Maybe it'll be a big hit. Of course, this is going to be, I believe, like the smallest baseball stadium in the MLB. It's going to be a lot more intimate in there. The way it's designed. So we'll see. But one thing I think that I really don't want to get lost is obviously the reason why we're talking about this at all, right? Is because of baseball. But like it really will. The development that they approved yesterday, all the plans. I mean, it's going to change St. Petersburg forever. And it's really consequential what happened yesterday, and it'll be really crazy to see what the end result is. I was asked on another show, is this going to work? I have no idea, but if I can't predict the future. I'm not an economist. I can't. However, one thing I just really hope does come true is all these promises of like actually bringing jobs, actually bringing opportunities for small minority owned businesses, that we have a talent pipeline, that we do give construction jobs and opportunities to minority owned businesses, that we employ what we call a disadvantaged worker. There's a goal to that all of 15% hours worked go to disadvantaged workers. Those can be anyone from like someone with a criminal history, a single parent, someone who's in the foster care system, someone who's received public assistance, someone who doesn't have a high school diploma or GED. These are folks that don't have many economic opportunities. And I hope that comes to fruition. I hope affordable housing does get built. I think we all just hope that this was the right decision, because we're leveraging $700 million that are going to be paid in increments through 2055. Relying on property values to increase 7% every single year, which the city says is conservative, but other economists we've talked to say it's a little risky. At this point, like, I think we just got to hope for the best. And Stu might have had the best of intentions. Everybody who's working on the deal might have them, but let's hope that the next generation of people who carry this out also have the same types of intentions and that it does work out. Because if not, that would be very bad.
Yeah, Colleen, one thing, it's a silly thing, but not really. It's day in and day out. One of the reasons people have trouble going to see the Rays, people say proximity, proximity, proximity. Well, guess what? That's done now. It's going to be where it is. So people in Tampa Bay, if you haven't made it to the Rays, you still need to go ahead and make it to this new location. But my concern is, what was ever said? Was there anything ever said specifically, not just about having parking spaces, but getting in and out of that place? Because my drive there, the last 45 minutes were like the last mile and a half getting into the stadium.
Yes. No,
I mean,
there's a plan for 14,000 parking spaces. Right now, I
yeah.
think they have 6. But of course, some of those parking spaces are going to be for the residences and the office space and the medical offices that are going to be there. It's not just going to be, there will be 2 garages dedicated to the stadium. One is going to be just south of the stadium. The other one is going to be on First Avenue South, so in like the northwest corner. But that's it. If you're asking me if like certain roads are going to change or they're going to build a new road and like major interstate arteries or something like that, no. And someone asked before, what about transportation options? That's beyond the city of St. Petersburg. That's a regional decision. But as far as I know, and I feel like I would know this if this was the case, none of that's happening. So, a lot of people talk about like, oh, move it to Tampa. Okay, well, we're past that. It's not happening in Tampa. But also, like, is there going to be any way to get to St. Petersburg easier? Not that I'm aware. That situation is going to be status quo.
Well, I think it's another good reason that they're making it a smaller stadium. But I am encouraged about that whole business development. I mean, quite honestly, when I would go see the Rays afterwards, I would either go down toward the pier and see some things down there. There's actually, some restaurants I might frequent. But if you looked more closely, I'd have to either wind up over at Ferg's. There's another place I think called the Berg. They're in the immediate proximity of the stadium. There isn't what I would hope to see, like what I have in other stadiums. And I'm really hoping all the development that they're talking about doing with this, and you're talking about how much larger that it is than the Battery, that it's going to be something when people come, there will be a reason to come in early to stay, or to stay longer. And like Matt was saying, hey, you've got the Babe Ruth Museum here. You're going to spend some time there in Baltimore there, as well as going to Camden Yards. And I'm hoping that we're going to see more of that with this new layout.
And
I
I
think
do
that's the goal. That I almost think you could bet on. Anything that's going to help out the stadium, that's going to be a priority.
I do want to point out though, like the whole 30,000 seat issue. In 2024, there are only 9 teams that are averaging 31,000 fans or more. So regardless of whether or not you have the seats, the Rays are going to be, able to reach, the top 21, let's say. And so they're putting themselves in an economic advantage in terms of the size just by making it look fuller every game. But I do think there'll be if when they do make the playoffs, they'll wish they had those extra seats. So I don't know if they'll have a plan for that. But ultimately they just charge more for the tickets, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
yeah, that's the 20,000 I was saying earlier. So yes, I'm glad to hear at least there's the opportunity for that much more. And the sad thing about the Trop now is when you go in there and you look up at the 300 sections and you see those blue tarps over all of those seats, and it's been kind of depressing. I'm hoping with the new stadium, that obviously will not be something we hope to see. And let's see how this new layout goes. I really don't have any more to add.
I'm sure you'll see a spike at the beginning. I mean, I think that's a pretty safe bet. How long and how sustainable? Who knows?
I look at the 2008 to 2010 stretch and I see 23,000 fans per game. If Rays fans or Tampa region fans know that the team is going to stick around, I firmly believe we can get back to that level at the minimum, and then potentially get to 25,000 or more with the residents moving into that area. I think that's feasible in my eyes. And if you look at this year's average, that would put the Rays somewhere around the 20th, to 22nd range in the league, which isn't outstanding, but it isn't horrible either.
Yeah. I do want to point out that for all this talk about attendance, and it is true, it's like the number one thing that's mentioned. Either A, move it to Tampa, or B, what about the attendance? City council never discussed that. That was never actually like a discussion factor in any of the meetings that I sat through. Interestingly enough.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider that attendance is actually going to impact, or not to some degree, whatever economic development is there, dollars being spent in the community. So that is curious.
The last question I have for you is sometimes these stadiums have a soft opening event. So in the Rays case, let's say before they open the park for the first, game of the season in 2028, and they want to have a soft event beforehand, what do you envision as a potential event that they could hold?
Oh man, I mean, I don't know if anybody's thought that far. I actually even asked you yesterday, well, what about naming rights? When are we going to know who's going to sponsor the name of the stadium? He had no idea. I will tell you, just because it's crazy in my personal experience, when Marlins Park opened, the new Marlins Park, I was actually an intern. I don't know if I shared the story last time I was on here, but I was interning at the Miami Herald. I was like 17, 18 years old. And I actually covered one of those soft launch events at Marlins Park. And in that case, it was a high school game. It was 2 high schools. So
Right.
there's a high school kid who can say that he actually hit the first home run in Marlins Park.
So what would be
That's something
something
they
similar in St. Petersburg? Is there a good I don't know, high school rivalry they could put in there?
Well, the only way I feel a little bit qualified answering this question is I used to cover Pinellas County schools
Mhm.
from 2015 to 2018. I know that I think, pretty good, Seminole High School has a pretty good baseball team. Some
Yep.
of these. I want to say Seminole's one of them.
Did she end
Maybe
up?
also Dunedin. So, Ron DeSantis was a little leaguer who's from Dunedin. So there's some of that. I mean, they could try doing that. I wouldn't be surprised if they went that route. But honestly, that's so far ahead. I don't know if anyone's really thought that far.
No, it's interesting too. You brought up a politician outside of the St. Pete Council, City Council, because we think we said before the last time out. I think Charlie Crist was offering to help out from the state when there was some earlier discussions with another stadium a while back, and that wasn't going to get support. So this was a do or die. St. Pete Council is going to step up, and they're going to have to do it, and nobody else is coming to help. But they did, and I'm as excited as can be to see what comes with this. So take us through again what the last steps are with the county, et cetera.
Absolutely. So we would be able to say that this is finally done. The 17-year search for a stadium saga is over if and when the Pinellas County Commission holds a vote. It's scheduled for July 30th. It could be moved. There is a workshop on July 25th. I will be there to kind of go over the agreement one last time. And if they do end up having this vote on the 30th, after that vote, then it's a go. Then we can say, yes, for sure, the Rays are staying. Yes, the stadium's going to be built. And yes, St. Petersburg will never look the same. So July 25th, I'm sorry, July 30th is a scheduled vote, could change. And, I was talking with my colleague, Jack Evans. He covers the Pinellas County Commission. Some of his bylines are on a lot of my stories. So I got to work with. We don't see, there's a potential it could be a unanimous vote. It could be 7 votes in favor. You need 4 votes in that case. There's 7 people on that commission. You need 4 votes. I don't even think that there's 2 unhappy people or unhappy people enough to vote no. Where in the St. Pete City Council, there were absolutely 3 unhappy people. There was no doubt about that. They were very upfront about that from the jump. But in this case, not a lot of contentiousness because they have a simpler decision. Their decision is $312 million from a tourist tax chest that comes from like the taxes on your hotel bill or a short-term rental like an Airbnb that has a limited amount of uses. Like you can't put it towards like roads or sewers. Like you got to use it for tourist things. And that chest makes like $100 million every year. So it's a much simpler decision and it's a lot less at stake there.
I think the fact that the vote is on my birthday is a sign.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. I'll be 30 again.
There you go.
I
There you
love
go.
it. Love it. Well, Colleen, you and your team, who all has it taken to put this analysis, this ongoing saga, if you will, for the last few years? Who all has been working on this?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's been a rotating cast of characters. If you're going to go back to 2007, I couldn't even name everybody we had. And of course, our newsroom has shrunken considerably since 2007. I think we're 25% the size we were at our peak in like the early 2000s. I mean, our newsroom has gone from over 400 journalists to like exactly 100 journalists now. So I've been on this since I took this job exactly 3 years ago this month. So it's been myself, Jack Evans, I mentioned, who covers the commission, the analysis that puts into context that we've been referencing. We got our real estate and data reporters, Rebecca Leibson and Tegan Simonton, to do some of these comparisons. We've also had Jake Cridlin, who's stepped up and filled in on some of the business parts of the deal. And of course, we've got editors. I got to shout out my editing team. My boss, Bill Varian, his boss, Mike Van Sickler. They've been great. It's been a slog. But we tried our best. We understand how much this is going to change our community, and it took a team. And I got to also shout out our photo team who was there to capture all of it too. Dirk Shad, who was with me all day long at City Hall, yesterday and said, we're not leaving until they drag us out of here. So it's been, easily a dozen people. Plus you got people who design that graphic, people who lay out the paper. I'm really proud to say I come from a really, really good team of people who really care about our community and journalism.
Well, thank you all, Colleen, for pulling all that together, and share our congratulations with the rest of your crew for doing this. I know there's still legs to a few more steps to take, but it sounds like that'll happen soon. And we can wish Matt a happy birthday when that does.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right, Colleen, any other final words you'd like to make sure you share with the team?
Yeah, no, just, thanks for having me on. We appreciate it. Thanks for reading our coverage. Really like it. We always encourage you to subscribe so we can keep doing what we do. So thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure.
Indeed. Thanks again. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. That has been Miss Colleen Wright, and she's done such a fantastic job keeping us in tune with whatever has been happening with the St. Pete City Council and the Tampa Bay Rays, and putting those final bricks together of a contract to saying, yes, we are going to stay. So thanks again, Colleen, and we'll have you back again sometime soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. You can always find us here. You can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, Deck, and of course, don't forget to mention baseballbizondeck.com. Until next week, thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and we'll talk with you again real soon. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music rocking forward.